Tonight we offer the thoughts and insights from someone who is local to us here in Tisbury, but whose reputation is international. We're joined, for those of you on the camera to picture the scene, I'm Johnny Messam, and this is our audience here, live in the Tithe Barn, to welcome Luke and Aidan, to really journey through your career. So I know you've been to this barn before, but I'm not going to say any more than that, but just to say welcome again, welcome to you, Aidan, for the first time.
Thank you very, very much. Johnny, thank you very much. It remains to us to thank you for your hospitality and for giving us this amazing, utterly amazing space. The book is called Furniture in Architecture. It's a great relaxation for me to be talking to somebody that I've known for years and who I believe to be one of the finest living designers, certainly in this country, if not in design right across the globe. And I hope we'll be able to enumerate why that is actually the case. The first thing that we need to ask is, Luke, what does furniture mean to you?
Well, I think the big difference is very interesting seeing the models of Neil McLaughlin's buildings further back in the barn here. What I see as furniture is very different from what most people think of furniture in a residential domestic setting. But it might be easy, I think, if we just do a very quick burn through to set the scene for the conversation that I think we should have a little bit later on. We design and make furniture for sensitive architectural settings. We tend to design for a 30 to 50 year life expectancy, sometimes 100 years or more, especially in Oxford and Cambridge. The fundamental principle, though, is that furniture should embellish the space and not embarrass it. And the other is, and this is relevant to this barn, that keeping great buildings relevant in a rapidly changing world is ultimately down to the quality of the furniture. The second thing I'd say, roughly, the fall of our client base is Harvard, Yale, more than 60 out of the 68 Oxford and Cambridge colleges. We've done 25 private schools, 19 major academic libraries, 24 major cathedrals, more than 120 parish churches, 7 national museums, 5 royal palaces, 2 supreme courts, 9 synagogues, and a partridge in a pear tree. So, thought for the day, Place Farm, one of the greatest barns ever, anywhere. It is essentially a 13th century space, and inside it feels like a cathedral. If you then jump to somewhere like Pontigny, which is a Cistercian monastery, it is essentially a stone barn. The windows are higher, there are side aisles supporting it, but it's not dissimilar, it's in the same language as Place Farm, until you put a table at one end. And then suddenly it becomes a church. That's what furniture does. Every single piece of furniture you put inside a great architectural space, it carries the symbolism of metaphor and meaning and symbolism as well as function. And of course you can end up by creating a whole load of horrors if you get it wrong. The object is the thing which actually then dictates the space. It changes the whole dynamic.
The space becomes alive, it becomes meaningful, it becomes useful. Its function, its purpose and its symbolism are all brought really by the agency of furniture.
The thing about furniture enables you to do is to inhabit space.
Yes, I would buy that.
Because actually a barn without anything in it is a barn.
Yeah.
But it becomes a gallery once you put decent lighting in or all the other kind of attributes.
And
church
works of art.
And works of art. The function has changed, but the barn hasn't. Yes, it's been rethatched and repaired and so on, but actually the space is still the same. Yeah. The medium that enables you to inhabit those spaces is this thing we call furniture.
Yes.
It's not just a product, which is a table or a chair or a bookcase or a sofa or something else. It's something else. It's about the concept which enables you to work or live in that space.
Yeah. Next.
Next, I think, is some horrors.
These are the embarrassing.
I've got some horrors here to give you an idea of what I'm trying to talk about. This is Corpus Christi College Dining Hall. Began to realise if they were going to generate any revenue out of the dining hall for the conference market, never mind the undergraduates, they needed to spruce their act up. Well, they couldn't afford to do anything with the hall. but by simply redesigning the furniture and getting the rhythm of quantity going again, they left the hall completely alone, but I think you'll agree it's a lot better simply by changing the furniture. Oundle School before, done in the early 80s, God knows who designed this, and just simply by changing the furniture and a few of the details, leaving the building completely intact, we completely transformed the whole thing, and now it is the one place that the headmaster takes everybody around when they're trying to sell some pupil spaces there. This was a library we're doing in Beijing. This is before. It could have been a hospital waiting room. This is the entrance to the library, and they wanted to give some cultural meaning to it, and by changing the door and changing the furniture, suddenly we got a story. And institutions tell stories through their interiors as much as anything else.
I think Luke is understating what they've been doing, particularly on this project. That furniture design is supposedly what Luke Hughes and Co do, but this is interior design, and it's very, very, very profoundly well thought out and carefully created interior design with a whole range of cultural indications, isn't it? With connections to libraries, connections to the ideas of learning, thinking about practical things like where the light falls and all that kind of stuff. This is not just a furniture design project, it's something very, very significant.
I asked myself asking the question, we're slightly taking on the role of the interior architect, but actually we do work a lot with architects the whole time. We probably work with 30 or 40 practices every year. The best projects we do is when we're working as a team with the architects, and they get it, they really understand it. And I'll show a couple of those projects later on. But your cultural resonance, it's about finding the meaning and the story. And what I've loved about working in China, the highly educated, cultivated Chinese who desperately want to tell their story in the way that they possibly can, post all the problems that they have internally. And it's very moving, actually, and I've learnt a huge amount from doing that. But you can't just design a piece of furniture. You need to understand about Chinese poetry, you need to understand about the art, you need to understand the meaning that's there. And working with particularly this is Keystone Academy in Beijing, there's one particular person, the librarian, Song Jingming, who's a marvellous client, because we were coxing and boxing with a lot of these cultural resonance, and it was fantastically stimulating and exciting. The big question is, what kind of door handle were we going to have on the doors here? And in discussion with Song Jingming, we said, isn't it funny that all nations across the world seem to have dragons, even though they don't exist? So what's all that about? They've been extinct, but they all breathe fire. Some of them fly, some of them don't. They all have horns and a tail, and people are afraid of them on the whole. So why is they have in North Wales as well as in northern Mongolia? I mean, what is this thing about dragons? So we hit on the idea with the Chinese thread of having a Welsh dragon with 4 claws and wings, which flies, dancing with a Chinese dragon, an imperial dragon, which has 5 claws and a conch shell that it's protecting, and they'd have a little dance. So the point really is about the dragon. It's you're dealing with something of the subconscious, the thing you fear. And of course now the students, if they have to get into the library, they have to grasp the thing they fear.
This is what I was going to say, is that there's a tactile thing. There's
hugely
a relationship right there and then. As soon as you put your hand on the handle,
you handle it, exactly. And I hope that in time they'll get the dragon's wings will get as polished as St. Peter's toe in Rome. I mean, this is the Botanic Institute in Cambridge, designed by Stanton Williams, where we designed almost every stick of furniture in the whole project. It's a marvellous building. It won 14 architectural prizes, including the Stirling Prize, and then it won the Stirling of the Stirling Prizes, of the pick of all the Stirling Prizes. But we designed all the furniture with the leather and the oak and the steel, matching the colours of the stanchions and the glazing, but it just was seamless. We were working to try and get the reflection of the architecture into the furniture. And you can see there's a language there which we're working with leather and steel and oak. Everybody thinks we're all just about wood in furniture. We're not. We're very much looking at the other materials. It was a fantastic project, great architects and great collaboration.
It's quite likely for someone who works like Luke does, although I don't know that there are any other people that work like Luke does, to put him in the pigeonhole that says classical, oak, ancient buildings. You know, one of the ways that I'm fond of describing his work is that he's furnished institutional Britain. You know, the cathedrals, the Oxford British colleges, all the professional institutions like Royal Institute of British Architects, British Medical Council, blah 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 blah. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And people think of Luke Hughes and Co. as a traditional company. It's not. It basically, in design and in craftsmanship, responds to whatever building that they are furnishing, and using indeed materials that aren't always just oak. Luke's interest, Luke's commitment, Luke's passion about furniture a lot of it comes from where he grew up. So I want him now to talk about, how was it that you became a cabinet maker, Luke?
I'm afraid it does come really down to us being here in Tisbury and Wardour. This is where I live now. But when my parents acquired the house in 1962, it hadn't been lived in for about 40 years. I was 5, and it really was in a bad way. As a small boy of 5, I used to pad round all the workmen who were working on it, the stonemasons, the carpenters, and all the other trades. I was absolutely captivated. It was this magical thing. My pa had been in Rome during the war as Deputy Chief of Staff, and he fell in love with ruins. He loved the idea of ruins. However, over the wall was the castle, and as small boys, it was irresistible to go climbing all over it. Climbing has been a major part of my furniture career for reasons that we'll explain shortly. But the other person who was absolutely key on all of this was Julian Breen. Julian lived in Senley at the time, and he had a barn on Barker's Hill. And he rented out this barn, first to a chap called David Rubio, and then to Michael Johnson. Well, firstly, he was a restorer of pianos. And aged 12 or 13, when I wasn't backing the tractor into the barn doors here, I used to go and sweep up for Mike Johnson. And Mike is still alive. Julian turned up one day and said, Mike, never mind restoring pianos. What we need is harpsichords. Early music's the thing. Mike said, I haven't got any. You don't know how to make a harpsichord. Well, you can get a book, can't you? Anyway, I was there helping Mike make his first harpsichord. He's now made 200 harpsichords, I may say. But the other person who turned up was a wonderful guitar maker called Jose Romaníos from Seville, who turned up having got a book on teach yourself guitar making, made a guitar, took it to Julian and said, would you play it? And Julian said, well, you got that bit wrong and that bit wrong, but I tell you what, if you do this and that and the other, it'll be a good guitar. Tell you what, you make 6, you go in, move in with Mike, he's late with the rent, I'll buy the first 2 and we'll get you going. So there was I, sweeping up in school holidays with Mike, making these fantastic instruments, absolute exquisite craftsmanship, and Jose making these fantastic instruments, and all the timbers, and bubinga and ebony and rosewood and everything else, and it became second nature. And I thought everybody did this kind of thing for a living. It was just seen, but I didn't realise at the time just how incredibly special it was. I think there's a very direct thing with music and craftsmanship. It teaches you how to coordinate with your hands doing different things. And there's something about the movement, especially if you start at an early age, something about those motor skills that really do get honed, I think, with playing a musical instrument. And I think there's a lot of that connection with music. When I was in the workshop and I was still making a lot of furniture, there was a kind of fluency of movement, and I couldn't understand why other people found it difficult. I just didn't find it difficult. And I'm sure looking back on it, I'm sure it had a connection with playing the cello.
You talk in the book about not just the prestidigitation of playing the cello, but the feeling.
Well, the resonance. There is that when those harmonics are really, or the reverberations go right through you,
Yeah.
and you feel you're wrapped round the instrument. Yeah. And when you're working fluently in a workshop, I mean, I've been doing some stonework in the garden recently, and I find the whole flow of it. It's very intoxicating. And when I'm looking for designers to join us, I look for people who can prove that they can make things. There is a direct connection with that ability to make and the ability to design. I think. They understand that whole process.
MV Atrius.
Yeah.
I've learned the word.
But actually, this is the ship I served on the Merchant Navy in my gap year in 1974 and 75. I spent 11 months on this. That's in Hong Kong Harbour, where I was working as a supernumerary midshipman. The crucial thing on this, and there's a lot of very funny stories about this time, was the Chinese carpenter, Mr. Jiang, on the ship, who I was assigned to for most of that time, who was brilliant. He was always fishing driftwood out of the Indian Ocean and making a cabinet before he got back to Hong Kong. He was absolutely wonderful guy, but he also taught me how to shore up cargo in a stall. Very, very formative time in my life. And that was a different kind of carpentry, very different, very crude, but also...
I was going to say massive, massive contrast to Mike Johnson and those incredible inlays.
Yeah, but it's still about the flow of movement and the use of tools. That was the thing. But also there's a practical thing about solving a problem quickly, especially in a store.
Yeah.
That was when I got down from Cambridge. This was my workshop in Lamb's Conduit Street. We called it Bloomsbury Joinery, and I decided after leaving Cambridge I really did want to go back. I studied history of architecture, but I realised that architects didn't really understand about furniture, and furniture designers certainly didn't understand about architecture. So there was clearly an opportunity to link the two if one had the knowledge.
This is a key moment. This is like you come down from Cambridge, but you went straight into working with your hands.
Well, I went to work on building sites, yeah.
How did your parents cope with that? How did they must have wanted you to follow in the profession, the law or publishing?
The law was quite a heavy beckoning call from them. My pa was absolutely brilliant about it. He said, follow your instincts. He said, whatever it is, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. My mother was much more, darling, you sure? You know.
Well, my mother was, Aidan's interested in woodwork. When I was making a living.
But I mean, I worked on a lot of building sites. And building sites are really good places to learn. I mean, you do get you get teased, especially if you're a little bit well spoken.
Yeah, a little bit posh. The Gordon Lennox story.
Well,
let's have that.
Very very quickly. I mean, I went in. I was queuing up some building materials in W.H. Newson, which was the timber yard in Pimlico at the time. And while I was at the end of the queue, while everybody's waiting to pay, a huge, tall, 6'8" chap moved and said, "Anybody here want to put up a few kitchen shelves?" And everybody sort of shuffled and looked at their toes, and nobody else answered. I said, "I'll do it. You're rather good at this," he said after I'd finished. "How about doing the kitchen?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "How about doing the cupboards and the bookshelves?" So I did that 4 months later. "Wouldn't like to make the archive library for the Grenadier Guards, would you?" In Wellington Barracks. I said, "Yes, of course. Have you ever made it like that?" "Well, no, but I'll give it a go." So I suddenly found myself there working in Wellington Barracks for about 2.5 months. But it's the whole series of accidents that sort of cannonaded through there.
This is why libraries are a thread in your work, really, isn't it?
Libraries they're wonderfully important places. And in China, it's very interesting because Chinese love books. Why? Because the internet is very vulnerable. It can get switched off. But to get hold of printed books is enormously intoxicating for them. And I love that resonance of why people still pursue a book and still find that it's the most peaceful thing that they could possibly do. So what you are creating in a library is an environment in which you can really enjoy that whole experience of learning. This was in 1981. We called it Bloomsbury Joinery, though we were already in Covent Garden by then. The workshop, which was so small, we had to make most of it out in the street, which we could do at that stage. Well, the man next door used to run all the barrows in Covent Garden Market, and so we used to use him to be able to deliver the stuff to all our neighbours. And there we are outside the British Museum at the time.
So why was it at that time that all of a sudden you decided to go off and start climbing mountains again?
Well, partly because I could, and that seemed, there were some opportunities, and I thought actually, how old was I then? 30. Actually, if I didn't get the serious climbing in the next 5 years or so, I was going to miss the chance.
Yeah.
Very interesting, I was on one mountaineering trip, and there were 6 of us on the trip, and 5 of the team were all in the woodworking business in one form or another. And that's odd, I think. You know, what other profession would have all found their way to mountaineering, but they were all woodies in one. One was that sold timber, another worked on carving, another was a carpenter in Edinburgh, and they were all connected. Now, what is it about that resonance with landscape and mountains and doing something with your hands? I don't know. There's a bit of magic there, which I think goes with those kinds of harmonics, if you like. While I was on one of those expeditions, I got really quite bad frostbite, and I ended up by getting frostbite on my right hand. So for about 6 months, I couldn't actually use any tools in the workshop. And this was formative, actually, because it forced me to go away from being a craftsman to being a designer for other people to make. So there's a whole series of accidents, if you like, that sort of came together at that point. There is a theme that runs right the way through that. And I think what you're pushing me towards exploring is, why is that relevant in 2020? Well, the answer actually is because technology has enabled all those principles to be as tangible today as they've ever been because of technology and not in spite of it.
One of Morris's ideals was that the craftsperson should start with a lump of wood and end up with a table, do the whole thing, do the whole process, which in terms of industrial production obviously makes no sense whatsoever. So one of our questions as we were developing the idea for the book, which we both wanted to call originally Arts and Crafts in the Digital Age, was the relationship between digital technology and craft. And that to me has been one of the most interesting things about when I try and explain Luke and Luke's work to other people about why I'm writing this book, is how it is that technology and those craft traditions, they feed each other, they support and enhance each other. They don't actually conflict with each other.
Gordon Russell, who's a furniture designer who I have great admiration for, and I've worked quite a lot with the old Gordon Russell firm, but he summed it up, probably about machines, is you've got to teach them some manners.
You like that one, don't you?
I do like it. It does mean, I mean, the China project, one of the China projects, we had 24 tons of furniture designed, developed and dispatched in 4 months. We had probably 20 workshops working on it at any one time. It was on time, ahead of time, it was ahead of budget, and it was all delivered in 6 containers into Beijing, 20 minutes earlier than we said 6 months ago. And there's no way any factory could have done that. There's no way that any normal production company would have had everything from the smallest little detail on the reception desk up to 2,000 metres of shelving and still get it all coordinated. You still need the man to select the timber, take the risk of what the bits he uses, and do the hand finishings. At the end of the day, the finishing is that hand thing. It's the kind of thing that Morris would have been talking about in the 1880s. This is
the thing I think we would like to leave you with, is that it's possible to bemoan the disappearance of craft because the world is now completely technologised. It's not so, absolutely not so.
How you harness technology and still maintain that dignity of the craftsperson is still a fundamental philosophical question that is relevant and will continue to be relevant whatever the technology comes. The big difference that I've noticed, though, is that craftsmen do actually welcome this, and because the prices have dropped so much on technology, it is now accessible to small workshops in a way it simply has never been ever before.
Ladies and gentlemen, Luke Hughes.
Thank you very much.